Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and this is my co-host.
I am Chris Huddleston.
And today we're very excited to be talking to you about the cult classic, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension.
He's a rocker. Doctor.
Don't tug on that. You never know what it might be attached to.
Inventor.
Activate oscillator.
It's broken the sound barrier.
Philosopher.
No matter where you go, there you are.
And the only hero
Buckaroo.
Buckaroo.
Buckaroo. Curse you, Banzai!
who can save us all.
Evil! Pure and simple from the eighth dimension! Venom!
Launch thermal pod.
Buckaroo Banzai is pure nutty fun.
Buckaroo, you forgot your thruster.
Why don't you hold on to him for a while?
The cult sci-fi classic.
Run!
In a dimension all its own.
Real life Martians landing in New Jersey.
Holy Toledo! We will hire a portable beam weapon. Vaporize the whole damn planet?
If we blow this today,
Get him up!
there ain't no tomorrow.
Left! I said left! This is left! I mean my left! Your left! Go your right!
Buckaroo, President's calling about is everything okay with the alien spacecraft from Planet 10, or should we just go ahead and destroy Russia?
Tell him yes on one and no on two.
The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
Which was yes, destroy Russia or number two?
All right, now I chose that trailer, which is not the original trailer. I chose that trailer because it's like from some remastered re-release or something. It just gives you a better sense of what the movie is actually about if you haven't seen it. The original trailer was almost completely nonverbal. It was just images of the characters and set to some music from the movie, and I just thought playing it here doesn't really add anything, so I chose this one. Do you have a synopsis for us, Chris?
I do. I have a brief one, but I think it sums things up pretty well.
Hit me.
Adventurer, brain surgeon, rock musician Buckaroo Banzai and his crime-fighting team, the Hong Kong Cavaliers, must stop evil alien invaders from the eighth dimension who are planning to conquer Earth.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much gets it.
That sums. It's a somewhat complicated plot when it really comes down to it. But so, what did I have two questions for you? Is this a nostalgia movie for you? Did you watch this when you were a kid, and what do you think of this one?
It is not a nostalgia movie for me in the way that, say, The Black Hole was, or Buck Rogers was, or I'm sorry, Flash Gordon. But I did see it. I have seen it, and I saw it when I was a kid, and I like it. I haven't seen it in a while. I wanted it to be better than it was. I guess I don't know how sort of more gently to put that. Like, it's trying to do an interesting thing. It's trying to sort of be an action comedy, comic book. It's not really a horror movie, but there are elements of kind of gross, practical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it's, the character of Buckaroo Banzai is a neurosurgeon, a particle physicist, a rock star, and a martial arts expert.
He's basically the best person in the world at everything, right?
Yeah, and it's just kind of an overstuffed turkey.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to say it's impossible to pull that off, but what I feel when I'm watching the movie is, as much as all the crazy stuff is going on, it feels oddly slow.
Yes.
Watching it. This is a movie with aliens and rocket cars and interdimensional travel and a cartoon bad guy, and the aliens are on the planet, and but not everybody it's like they live. Most people can't see that they're aliens. And there's the government, and there's gunplay, and there's a rock show, and and yet it's sort of boring. The moments that land, I think, are fun and memorable. My favorite thing about this movie is the costume design. Like,
Mm-hmm.
somebody designed some really spectacular outfits, and one of his sidekicks is this blonde guy named Perfect something, or I don't know, Joe Perfect, or I forget what his name is, but
Mm-hmm.
he looks like a model, and I think he literally is wearing a different outfit in every cut, like certainly in every scene. But they'll be like, there's a couple of places like they're inside, and they're like, "All right, let's go," and then they're walking out to the car, and he's in a different outfit.
Mm-hmm. There's one, in all honesty, I, I think one of the absolute best things about this movie is the end credit scene.
Yeah,
They have this great song that they play,
yeah,
and it's
that's the trailer. Sorry to interrupt you,
oh,
but
okay.
I didn't choose to put that in here because the trailer is really mostly just that end credits thing where they're walking through the like aqueduct or whatever it is, and it's like beep 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 boop, boop. It's just that song. It goes on for a minute and a half, and then right at the end, there's some gag where
Yeah,
one of the guys is like, "Hey, Buckaroo, the president wants to know if he should, stand down or just go ahead and blow up Russia."
yeah,
And I just didn't think that playing that trailer, because it's a non-visual and we're not showing people
sure,
the
yeah.
images. It's kind of great. If you watch it, you kind of get a great taste of
I think
the
people can
tone.
almost watch that and not watch the movie. It's so that part is so much fun. But that Joe Perfect guy or whatever with the blonde hair, I was noticing last night. Last night was when I watched it, and when they're walking along, he is wearing a white suit jacket with no shirt underneath.
Mhm.
So it's just such a ridiculous outfit.
It's ridiculous, and he's got it's like it's early '80s couture.
Yeah.
So there's lots of and there's a lot of Japanese influence in it. I was reading something, I think, on Wikipedia where Peter Weller was talking about playing this character. He said his influences were, and I won't remember them all, but it was like, um, it was either Einstein or Leonardo da Vinci. He lists off all these crazy people, and the last one of what was Adam Ant,
Mm-hmm.
because he's also,
He looks a lot like Adam Ant in the movie. I never thought about
yeah,
that before. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, it's sort of like, it's just a lot to pull off, and I think that the director would have had to have had a real crystal clear. Like when we talked about The Lighthouse, we talked about it's a two-hander. One actor sort of seemed to have his interpretation of the script that was more the Magic Lighthouse side of it,
Mm-hmm.
and the other actor had his interpretation of it. It was two guys who are stuck on an island go crazy. And the director was sort of like, yes. And he let them both be in the movie that they wanted to be in. And then his vision of it was so specific that what he put together was a combination of those. He let that be in the actor's performance. And he made an incredibly specific looking movie that told the story as he wanted to tell it. Now, that's not to say, there was ambiguity in it, but when you watch that movie, what I got was a feeling of great specificity, scene to scene, visual specificity.
Mm-hmm.
And in Buckaroo Banzai, it's sort of all over the place. So you have a character that he's a doctor and a scientist and a rock star and a martial artist. And it's like that never comes together in one man. Like what you're left with is just kind of Peter Weller doing these different things. Here's Peter Weller doing brain surgery. Now here's Peter Weller breaking the eighth dimension. Now here's Peter Weller playing the guitar. Now here's Peter Weller putting down his samurai sword. And instead of it being like, wow, this incredible guy that is all these things in one, it's sort of like, well, he's this guy that you like to watch on screen who is, the movie tells us, is all of these things, but does that make sense? Like
It does, yeah.
it doesn't come together. It's like
Mm-hmm.
when you make a soup or a stew or something and you put on all the ingredients, but you haven't cooked it long enough and you take a bite of it, and it's not that it tastes bad, but you just taste all the separate things instead of it kind of, if you cook it for a couple of hours, you let it sit overnight, and then the next day you taste it and all those flavors have kind of blended together in a wonderful way to create something more than the ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm doing a lot of the talking.
No,
What are
that's
your thoughts?
so. You might be surprised. I did not see this movie as a kid. It was one that I was always really interested in. I remember specifically they did a huge advertising blitz in comic books at this time. So I remember like all these Marvel comics that I was reading at the time, they were advertising for this, and it was like, oh, I really want to see that. And for some reason, I never got around to it, and I'd always wanted to. And I watched it for the first time maybe 2 years ago, and I enjoyed it overall. What I like about it is I think there's a charm to the just him and this goofy team that he has, and they're like fighting crime or whatever. And I kind of enjoy the fact of, if this were a movie today, they would give you everybody's backstory. Right. It would probably be an origin story about Buckaroo Banzai and how he, learned to do all these things. But they just kind of drop you into it, and it seems like the characters have this shorthand with each other. And I don't know, that part of it just kind of works for me. It's just,
I agree.
I think charm is the, they're likable, just kind of fun characters. This is mostly a pretty light movie. The other thing that I really like about this is you have John Lithgow as this crazy, and he's the first person who went into the eighth dimension, and it made him insane. And he is, John Lithgow.
He gets sort of halfway stuck into the eighth dimension, and what we find out is the aliens have banished one of their bad guys to the eighth dimension. It's like the neutral zone for them.
Yes.
And so he gets he's trying to go through a solid surface, and he gets kind of stuck halfway, and the evil alien who's been banished to that realm somehow then inhabits him.
Yeah.
So when they pull him back out of it, it's not really Dr. Lazaro or whatever his name is anymore. He's been possessed by this evil alien. So yes, he's crazy and bonkers, but it's not really him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the aliens, the eighth dimension doesn't seem to be populated by its own species. It's just where the aliens have banished their bad guy.
Right. Yeah. But John Lithgow, John Lithgow's he's one of my all-time favorites. He's an amazing dramatic actor, but also a great comedic actor, and he's awesome in this. You have Peter Weller, you have Ellen Barkin, you have a really young Jeff Goldblum.
He sort of steals the movie for me.
He does. He's like in a cowboy outfit all the time.
There's an early scene where they're doing brain surgery, and the Jeff Goldblum character is kind of has called in Buckaroo Banzai to kind of help him out of a tight spot, and he's saying, like, he's dropping all of these neurosurgical terms. He's like, so then I went is this and that, but then I realized I don't know whether that's the bicuspal blah 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 or but whatever, and that's when I thought I better get out. And Peter Weller has some pithy piece of baloney about neurosurgery, and then at the end he's like, so I wanted to talk to you about that. We have an opening. You realize they're now talking about the rock band. And Goldblum's like, oh, yeah, I'm interested. You have an opening? I sort of didn't dare to hope, and it's really funny. And then he's the one that shows up in this sort of 1950s white hat cowboy thing with
the spurs or the chaps or whatever. Yeah,
it's a great costume.
And his name is New Jersey in the movie. The blonde haired guy that we were talking about, his name is Perfect Tommy. And to give you an idea of the kind of what the humor is like in this. One of the aliens is played by one of the bad aliens is played by Christopher Lloyd, and his character is John, and his last name is spelled Bigboote, and they call him Big Booty all the time, and he keeps correcting him. It's Big Booty. And so that gives you an idea what and if you don't think that's funny, you're probably not going to like this movie, because it's that kind of.
Right.
And again, it's one of these we've talked about some of these in past episodes. You kind of wonder who this was made for. I mean, that's like an eighth grade level humor, and in a lot of ways,
I say comic book movie, because it feels like this was originally a graphic novel. It wasn't, by the way.
Yeah.
But my first impulse is like, was this a popular early 80s graphic novel that someone convinced a studio to make this, this was kind of a labor of love.
Mm-hmm.
But nope.
Yeah. But you just this was a major studio release. This was 20th Century Fox, but it bombed. I was reading it made about half of its money back, but it's become a cult classic since then. But you just wonder who this was intended for. It's you could say maybe it's a kid's movie kind of, but there's some more kind of adult elements in it where it's, maybe a little bit not appropriate for kids. And it's just, again, it's one of those, this was probably a cocaine influenced movie. I have to think
it had to have been,
because it's just so weird.
I don't like that I keep bringing up the Marvel franchise, but Joss Whedon and those guys that made the Avengers, and it's got to do with the casting too. Robert Downey Jr. and Scarlett Johansson and all of them, but they're all great, but you have to give it to the director who helms this thing. Like, how do you take this material with these soul stones? And it's just, I mean, I love the comics, but it is, you go with it, and it's a comic book. It's a 35-cent piece of pulp, right? Who cares? Soul Stone's are great. But on screen, it's very difficult to deliver this material with a straight face. And even with CGI and everything else, those movies simply would not work if you didn't believe that Tony Stark, that this was real to him and that he cared, right? And he could deliver this flippant stuff in a way that made you also care whether he succeeded or failed, right?
Yeah.
Believe in these absurd stakes. I mean, the stakes are literally the end of the world, and then it just escalates. Then it's the end of the solar system, then it's the end of the galaxy, then it's the end of the universe. You can't even get your head around those baloney stakes. But they pull it off. And I somehow feel like there was a number of movies that tried to sort of get at it in the 80s. And I mean, like the original Superman movies, I remember them fondly, and I enjoyed watching them. And I give a lot of the credit to that, to Christopher Reeve.
Yes.
In his performance, because he's just such a great actor and he's so empathetic. And but the spandex suit and the weird wire effects, it just, you had to swallow a lot of like, okay, well, that's a dumb looking shot, but okay, I'm still on board, And in this one, it just felt like it could have been so a slam dunk, like so much more entertaining than it actually is in watching it. And it's just that the director didn't. If you have to lay it on somebody, you have to lay it on the director, right? Because he's got to pop in there and pull Lithgow back a little bit.
Yeah, because he's way out there.
Be like,
it's a lot of fun, but he's way out there.
Yeah, you're great, but that Italian accent you're doing is, and this is the early 80s.
Yeah.
But that Italian accent is offensive.
Yeah,
It sounds like you're making fun of Italians. And now you sound sort of Russian. Like, it's just, we need to do another take of that because that sounds sloppy and wrong, or however you tell it to him, but you have to reel it in. And with Peter Weller, it's got to be Peter, I get the deadpan. I get that that's kind of your thing and that's what you're going for. We need a little more out of you. It's reading really cold, you know? I
Yeah.
just feel like across the board, and it's like, perfect. You don't have a lot to do in this, so you need to make some choices. Like, what? It's not enough to just look good with your shirt off in this scene. You know who is your character, and the director. If the actor doesn't do that, and the director wants to make it a good movie, the director has to do that work with the actor.
Yeah.
I think. I mean,
Oh,
that's
yeah. This is such an 80s movie. I mean, it's kind of one of these things where you can, it's hard to imagine it being made in any other era. This mid 80s, I mean, it just fits in so perfectly with that.
the concept.
The concept,
of
yeah.
One, it's so you're right about the cocaine. It's like this guy's everything. He's the best brain doctor. He plays the hottest guitar. Like everybody wants to be. Women love him. Men want to be around him.
Yeah.
He's a ninja. It's just like he drives a rocket car.
But
you're just kind of like, okay.
He's all these things, but he's not a douche. All these characters are really, I don't know, they're just likable. I don't know, but a few years ago. So I mean, this again for a movie that bombed. It has a following.
Yeah,
and a few years ago, it also has Clancy Brown in it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these. Yeah. And this is a name that I think anybody maybe like 10 years younger than this would just be like, I don't know who you're talking about, but it has Billy Vera and the Beaters. His name is Pinky Carruthers. So they have all these, crazy names and everything. But
well, on crazy names, I just want with the John Big Booty. One thing I like about it is all of the aliens are John somebody. So there's like, I don't know, 150 aliens or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's some registry of like all these people like were created in the same day or got social security cards the same day. And they're all, John Big Booty, John Smallberries, John, right?
Yeah.
Some of them are more. One of my favorite scenes is when the kind of clownish bureaucrat, I don't know if he's the Secretary of Defense or whatever, is like
I think
comes
so,
into
yeah.
the facility. And there's these two goons who are aliens that have name tags or whatever, and the first guy's name is John Yaya or something like that. And he's like, I'm writing you up. What's your name, soldier? And he's like, John Yaya. He's like, John Yaya. He's like, and what's your name? And he looks at the guy's name tag. He's like, John Smallberries. It's one of the few times in the movie that it really made me laugh out loud. It's like, I feel like if the comedy in the movie, as juvenile as it is, was hit with the sort of right energy, and the actor has to know it's absurd, but they also have to play it with enough serious. The universe of this movie is a serious universe.
Yeah.
But it's absurd. So I think if everybody had been right on the right energy frequency, this thing might have taken off.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. If they would ever reboot this, and several years ago, and I don't know what it must have fallen through, but Kevin Smith was in talks to reboot this, I think, as a series, as like for Netflix or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he was going to direct or if he was just going to executive produce it or what. I don't think he would be right to direct it. I don't think he's a strong enough director. But the guy who could do this perfectly, I think, is James Gunn, the Guardians of the Galaxy guy. I
was going to say Favreau would have fun with it too.
Yeah, I think, but I think
James Gunn, man,
he would hit the perfect tone. I don't know if because the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, have that, they're weird and kooky, but it works.
They pull off it's as bonkers. Doctor Strange and Guardians of the Galaxy are as weird as the Marvel Universe currently has gotten on screen.
Yeah.
And I think you get the right actors to do it, and you get the right director who strikes the tone between earnest and absurdist.
Right.
And he finds a harmony there. They really work.
Oh yeah. And I don't know if have you seen the previews for the next, he's directing the next Guardians of the Galaxy, but he's also directing the next Suicide Squad. Have you seen the trailer for that?
No,
Oh, it
it's
looks,
just it's a reboot of Suicide Squad, right?
it is, yeah, but it's
just like they didn't like the way the first movie performed, so they're making Suicide Squad. They're
yeah.
convinced this property has legs, but the first one was a fizzle, so they're just gonna give it to another director and let somebody else take another pass at the script and remake the movie.
And again, it's one of these things where you'll have to watch the trailer, but I think he's perfect for it because it looks crazy.
But they're keeping her as Harley Quinn, right?
They're keeping her as Harley Quinn, yeah.
Does anybody else stay? Nobody else stays.
They have
A couple of people.
a couple of the people are back. They recast the Will Smith role with Idris Elba.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which will be pretty awesome. But and then there's new characters, but it looks nuts. It's that same kind of tone as Guardians of the Galaxy, where I don't know, that's one that I'm pretty excited about because but he could, if they ever, would dig this property up, I would like to see him do it. He could do a great job.
It is so of the early 80s though, with the shoulder pads and the hair and the skinny ties.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why the fashion and the music, the music is very of the period. It's not particularly inspired music. Like when we were talking about the black hole, there's a lot to pick apart about the black hole, but that black hole theme, that bum bum, bum bum bum, it's really memorable, and I think some of the other 80s movies we've talked about, like the music is one of the memorable things about it. You're like, oh, that's a hot track. Like that is some crazy 80s synth, And I think of 80s movies, I think of the Psychedelic Furs did a lot of stuff. It's like the music and the style were a big part of 80s movies. It was like a featured aspect of 80s movies. You have a topless shot, somebody takes off their top, you've got a montage that's got some popular,
rock song.
Yeah. That maybe has it. That's the track is just it's not on an album. It's just in this movie. And the music was definitely of the 80s here, but kind of a fizzle for me in this. There wasn't a real, considering he's a rock star.
Yeah.
That what they have is kind of a blues band,
right?
Sort of. They've got a horn section, and then they're just kind of passing it around. And I'm like, is this the Blues Brothers or is this? And then he comes out and he does this kind of Van Halen, lead guitar lick, but it feels out of place in the song that they're playing. Which is Peter Weller doing a guitar solo is memorable in that moment, but the song and the band are forgettable, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is a failure of that scene because you want to illustrate that he is the best neurosurgeon in the world. And he goes through the eighth dimension. Okay, so I'll buy he's a scientist who invented this thing. But you want it when he's a martial artist, you want a scene that you're like, oh, snap, look at that. That's incredible. That's some Bruce Lee stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
When they're playing the rock band, you want to be like, I would buy that album.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. I think that remaking it now, you'd have to figure out, you couldn't just make it like this is a movie from the early 80s because modern audiences don't have any. I don't know. Let me ask you, because we're the same age, and growing up in the 80s, it really was like I was never. First of all, we're from West Virginia, so we were always behind in the fashion thing anyway. But I could never imagine myself in the big shoulder pad.
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
sleeves pushed up. It was so.
I don't know if it was a
combination of that's really cool, and that's also looks really stupid. Like that looks really stupid, but somehow that guy or that woman, they're pulling it off. Like they make it look
Yeah.
cool somehow.
It's one of those things I wonder, we were children, so we wouldn't have been wearing the clothes that these people were wearing. But I wonder if we had been 20 at the time in 1984 and you went to a club or a bar or whatever, is this how people were dressing, or was this just how people dressed in the movies?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe if we're in
Because I think we just kind of
metropolitan
wore jeans
Chicago or
and
New York or LA, maybe. Yeah, I mean,
we just kind of wore jeans and t-shirts and stuff,
yeah, I just always looked like a townie.
Yeah.
I just had,
Yeah.
at this time in my life, I wore a thin gold chain, and I had my hair parted down the middle, and it was
Yep.
feathered.
I had that.
Like I was in, what's the name of the band that sang everybody's working for the weekend?
Oh, Huey Lewis and the News.
No, it wasn't. But they had the same hair, so it could.
Everybody's working for the weekend. Was that
Loverboy?
Loverboy, yeah.
But Huey Lewis had the same haircut.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just this feathered thing, and
Mhm.
that's what I was going for. I was going for that look, and it was not nailing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have cool clothes.
Yeah, and we didn't know anybody that. And again,
Didn't know anybody who did.
I don't think if we grew up in Los Angeles or something, I don't necessarily know that 11-year-olds would have been dressing like that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
But I always wonder about that, like because we just weren't that age,
But that's why I use the term couture, because fashion at that time always felt like kind of runway. Like it's not practical. It's kind of art. It's clothing art.
Yeah.
It's like, what if we made the shoulder pads bigger? And what if we made the hair on the sides of the head? Of course, now we're doing it where people are shaving their head on their sides. It's a similar look, but they're like, we're going to slick it back or pin it back on the sides, and we're going to perm it up on top like a rooster. And we're going to do crazy big shoulder pads like the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And we're wearing a blazer, but we're pushing the sleeves of the blazer up, and it's hammer pants, and you're just like you're taking the human form and you're dressing it in clown clothes.
Yeah.
But wearing it like Emperor's New Clothes, like you're the coolest dude, and like this is the coolest thing. And it sort of worked. They sort of pulled it off.
Yeah.
They sort of made it seem glamorous and awesome, and like, oh, I could never date a girl like that. But you're like, but she looks like an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. But they just own this stuff, and and that was something, you wonder, and again, it's, you never, and I've always wondered what the psychological explanation for that is, that when you look back at the way you dressed 20 years ago or whatever, and you're just like, why did anybody wear that? That looked ridiculous. But you don't get that at the time,
Right. I think, you know what, I mean, I'm not a fashion expert. I think that if you look back at the 30s and 40s, and the men's suits, they had a higher waist. They were at the natural waistline, but in ties go. It's a pendulum swing from how long or short the tie is, and how wide or thin the tie is, right? But somewhere in the middle is a fairly standard men's suit that is tailored at the waist, accentuates the shoulders a little bit. We bring that out, and it's about a tie and a pocket cuff, and the trousers break more or less at the shoe, and it's like there's a classic in the middle thing that fashion sort of swings. In the 70s they had bell bottoms where it was super low rider, super hip hugger, but that huge flare at the bottom, and that was about emphasizing the legs and the hips and that area of the body.
Sure.
And then it just, I don't know, fashion has never made any sense to me, but in the early 80s I felt like it was particularly absurd and sort of radical, and like, let's take the human form and exaggerate unusual elements of it.
And that's the thing that I was thinking watching the movie. last night is I thought, are they like the characters, or the actors themselves? Are they thinking, "Wow, I look really cool in this outfit," or were they just like, "This is ridiculous. I look like an idiot"? Was it that they're in the time, so they can't really see it? I don't know, but I think something that this movie suffers from is, this isn't a bad movie, but with these no bad it's good movies, those kind of just happen. Those are somebody's trying to make a good movie, and they're very earnest about it, and it turns out to be ridiculous. And this movie is almost like they're trying to manufacture a cult film. I think they're almost saying, like, this will be really crazy. Let's do. I definitely think there's some of what we were saying that, it was just like they just did another line of Coke, and we're just like, oh, and then we'll have this happen, and and then that. But I also think some of this was deliberate, that they were purposely trying to be weird.
Yeah.
And it doesn't totally work, as opposed to something where it's just sort of organic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, because I think that it's weird by design.
Yes.
Which is why I think it would make sense if you said, "Oh, this was a graphic novel first."
Mm-hmm.
It's weird and countercultural and like norm breaking by design. But where I think it feels coked up to me is like, if we shot this shot and everybody was a little coked up and the director was like, "Oh, great, great, this is awesome, that's great, moving on,"
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not great. Like, go back and look at it with clear eyes and get the thing that you want. And I don't do cocaine. I've never done cocaine.
Right.
But
Yeah. Myself.
my understanding of it is that, it puts this shiny gloss on everything. Like, I'm the best talker. You cranks your confidence way up. It cranks your optimism and way up. And I think when you're making a film, that's gonna, if you're doing a lot of coke,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably looking at it and thinking it's more awesome than it actually is.
You can walk around with a blazer without any shirt on underneath and be like, "Hey, I look awesome." I mean, the guy's in really great shape, so it's, it's not,
I don't hate that choice. It's a ballsy choice.
Yeah.
I just wish they'd given some of these peripheral characters a little more to do, because
Right.
there's like 8 of them. He's got a posse of a ton of people, and you said some of their names, but you wouldn't know their names except if you watch the credits, and you're kind of
Right.
like, why do there need to be 8 if you're not going to give any of them anything to do or say other than like, "What's next, Buckaroo?" It's like,
Yeah. And again, it's the kind of thing that they're all sort of really awesome at what they do, and they just, they're these heroes that whatever
but
fight crime,
we have to take that on the movies say so. We
Yeah.
don't see that. We just are told that.
Mm-hmm.
We're told that they're famous and that there's comic books of them and that people buy their albums, and they're like, "Hey, that's Buckaroo Banzai." But we don't. There's a couple of, scenes where they're chasing the aliens and everybody whips out a, handgun and they're all like running around chasing the aliens, but it's unremarkable. It's
Yeah.
forgettable, really.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, you can't just say, now a chase scene with gunplay ensues, and I'm like, amazing. It's got to be amazing. Like, you have to wow me with it, and it's so underwhelming in the execution that what you're left with is like, I don't see what's so great about this this bunch of folks. Like, they don't
Yeah.
seem particularly, yeah, they're well dressed or whatever, but does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Like you said, you have, or I mean, this part I said, but these characters are, they have this certain amount of charm, but and it's this weird, quirky stuff, and there's fun things in it. But like you said, it's just kind of dull. It's kind of slow and boring at times. This is definitely one where I think people will be resisting the urge to look at their phones. So it just kind of doesn't all come together.
So I have some other stuff I want to talk about. So I know we're not all that far into it, but let's make our recommendations. I would personally say, do I recommend this movie? I would say, yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. It's bonkers enough that you should know. Like it's a pop cultural reference. If you say it's like Buckaroo Banzai, you should have seen the movie, even if you've skipped through bits of it or have something else. If check your phone.
Yeah.
It's worth checking out. And there are moments of glory, and I do think that the style, even though I don't think the substance is so much there, the style of it is a lot of fun. The
Absolutely.
jokes mostly don't land, which is a bummer. Because
Yeah.
you've got a lot of really funny people in this. But I would say yes to that. But again, if you're looking for an entertaining date movie, like if you're looking like, oh, that movie looks like a lot of fun. It's not. It's not a lot of fun. It's definitely worth a watch if you're like us and you're into the genre and you're into cult classics and you want to see what all the buzz is about. Then by all means, you're not going to be sorry that you saw Buckaroo Banzai, but I cannot say that it is one of these. Like Fright Night was fun.
Yes. That's a
And
great
and
80s movie,
and Buckaroo Banzai was trying real hard to be fun, but my net experience of it, and there's fun moments, but my net experience of it wasn't that it was all that fun.
Yeah. Yeah,
What
I
do you
totally
think?
agree. This isn't even a party movie. This isn't even really something you get put on at a party and it be fun, I don't think. But
You could have it on with the sound off, and every now and then somebody would look at the screen and be like, "What the hell is that?
Yeah.
Like, what's that crazy show?"
Right. But
But
yeah, I agree. I think it's, if you're somebody like me who you grew up in the 80s, but for whatever reason you didn't see this, I would definitely recommend it. Or, if it's a younger person that's into 80s stuff, although I can't imagine a lot of younger people liking this because
getting it,
yeah,
it's like,
getting it and
what is this?
the pacing, and all of that. So I definitely recommend, if you're into cult movies and you haven't seen this one before, I would say recommend it. People that aren't into weird stuff like this, which I don't really know why you'd be listening to this podcast if you don't like some weird things.
Right.
But
Fair enough.
yeah, I mean it's kind of a mild recommendation. It's on IMDb. It is I think it's like a 6.3,
That sounds
which
about
that
right.
sounds about fair. Yeah,
Because there's something to it. It's
yeah,
not your
it's hard. It's kind of
not
hard
your
to
e
quantify, but
it's
it's
not your everyday, direct. It's not just like, oh, some stuff that Netflix spun up and threw some money at just because they needed to fill a particular slot in their demographic. And there's a fair amount of that, and that I wouldn't even bother to review with you here because I'm like, it
Sure.
just feels like, company made sausage, which is not to say that the actors don't do a good job or it doesn't look good or whatever, but you're just kind of like, this feels like it was made to order and there's no spirit igniting it,
Mhm.
and like designed to be forgettable Wednesday night watching.
Mhm.
And this is better than that. This
Yeah.
is really truly original in
Yeah,
a
there's
lot
some
of
love that
ways.
went into this. I think the people involved were you get the feeling that they thought they were making something maybe better than what it turned out to be.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think of the Coke.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's good enough that you look at it and you're like, man, this could have been really great. Like
Yeah.
this could have been one of my all-time favorite movies, but it's not,
Mhm.
which is sort of sad.
Yeah, yeah. I agree.
So before because we're at 42 minutes, like, have you seen episode 1 of season 2 of The Mandalorian?
I have not yet.
Oh man! Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you about
Oh,
it.
sorry. No, I'll see, I don't have Disney Plus.
I'm gonna
So,
spoil it for you. No.
yeah. No, I don't have Disney Plus, so I go and watch it at my sister's house. So,
That's one of those tent pole properties of Disney. I mean, Disney
yeah.
Plus. Talk about tent pole properties. They get a lot of stuff, but man, I enjoy that series so much. And there's only released the one so far, but it's a great episode.
I'll try to watch it soon and
Timothy Oliphant's in it.
yeah. They've
It's
had a lot of interesting casting choices, because they put some comedians in there,
yeah,
and
Bill Burr. Yeah.
so yeah. So yeah, I'll try to watch it before we talk the next time.
Excuse me. Have you, by any chance, just to go back to something we talked about a long time ago, have you seen any of Raised by Wolves, Lovecraft Country, or what was the other one? There was a what was the other one? Do you watch Star Trek Discovery?
No, I
Are
don't
you a
have
Star Trek person?
a little bit.
Not so much.
I loved I loved the original series when we were
Sure.
kids. I was really into that, and I loved the movies with the original cast. I never got into. I would watch it some, but I never got into the Next Generation,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't really care anything about the Next Generation movies. I really liked and I know it's kind of blasphemy for real Trekkies or Trekkers or whatever, but I liked the J.J. Abrams movies a lot.
Sure.
He admitted that he was basically kind of remaking Star Wars, but I thought it worked. But I've been
And
intrigued
he
by
did remake Star
yeah,
Wars.
that's true as well. I've been intrigued by those newer shows. Did you tell me that was it you and I that were talking that you said that Picard wasn't all that great? It was okay, but was that somebody else?
It's hot and cold.
I
I
think that
mean,
was maybe you that
I love me some Patrick Stewart.
yeah.
It's I enjoyed it. I watched that whole first season, and I guess they're doing another season of it, and I will watch that too.
Mhm.
I can't say that I'm, biting my nails waiting for it to come out. And I like Star Trek Discovery a lot. I think season 1 is really great, and season 2 is also pretty good, and season 3 that I'm watching so far is like, eh, you know how things kind of like there's like a trajectory of shows that they sort of slide towards a soap opera
Yeah.
element where it's then this is not actually happening on Star Trek Discovery. I'm more talking about kind of a tone, but people start having relationships, and then it starts coming like, oh, now they're having feelings. Is it going to happen? And then it does, and the only place they can go is have a break off, and then they pair up. And you're kind of like, what? We're in space. Like, is it? I think they came out of the gates so hot on that show that it's very difficult for them to keep the pace up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's starting to feel, maybe they got new writers. I don't know. It's starting to feel a little bit like a parody of itself as it goes into season 3. It's just too bad because it's a lot of really talented people.
One thing that you said there that is kind of what keeps me away from series now in general is that soap opera aspect. When you look back to the original Star Trek and Star Trek Generations, or Star Trek the Next Generation, those were just a different story every week, right? That wasn't an ongoing. And that leaves me. I don't know. There's just so I get overwhelmed that there's so many different shows, and it's like, okay, this is 10 episodes, and then they've got the next one coming out, and and I'm sure there's some series that they're doing it with, but I would kind of like it if they would somewhat resurrect that idea of it's just a different story every week. Maybe there's an ongoing arc every once in a while, but you don't have to feel like, oh, if I miss an episode, I don't know what's going on.
You might. There are elements of Discovery season 1 that you might really dig. It's actually kind of a slow burn.
Mm-hmm.
So Star Trek Discovery is set in the time right before Captain Kirk is assigned to the Enterprise. So it doesn't take place on the Enterprise, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Christopher Pike is the captain of the Enterprise.
Right.
And Spock is his science officer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Discovery is a science vessel that Christopher Pike is sort of temporarily assigned to for reasons. And the actor who plays Christopher Pike is terrific in this because he sort of bridges in the J.J. Abrams, they've got a great guy who plays Pike, and in the original series there was a pilot
Yeah, I
that
remember that one.
that they kind of worked in later called the Menagerie. That was
Mhm.
it wasn't about Kirk and his crew, it was about Pike and his crew. And then that was the pilot that didn't air as a pilot, and then episode 1 was this whole different set of people. And you're like, oh. But the Pike in this one kind of merges those two performances,
Mhm.
and he brings a lot of Kirk energy, a lot of cowboy energy to it. Like, he is the steadfast, reliable, like the crew trusts him implicitly and really likes him. He's the kind of captain that everybody wants to follow.
Mhm.
But he's also a bit of a maverick and shoot from the hip kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And it's really entertaining
Okay.
television if you liked the original series. And the fan response, the audience response was so intense to that particular crew of people. Rebecca Romaine plays his first officer,
Oh, wow.
and the guy they have playing Spock is fine. I know that sounds dismissive, but how are you
Sure.
going to fill Leonard Nimoy's shoes?
Mhm.
You can be Chris Pike and you can bring Shatner, you can bring Kirk energy to it, but you're not playing Kirk.
Yeah,
But
right.
now he's playing Spock. And same thing with Zachary Quinto. It's like, he's great. I have nothing against Zachary Quinto, but he's not Leonard Nimoy. He's just
Mhm.
not, and that's
Yeah.
what everybody thinks of. That's why it's so beloved. But they're doing a spinoff that is called Strange New Worlds, I think,
Mhm.
that is specifically the kind of one-off like storyline. This week they go to the planet, and
Yeah.
this week they explore a weird phenomenon, and it's much more modeled after the original series, and
I'd
it
definitely be
follows
into that.
Pike and Spock and Rebecca Romaine, whose character's name is just number one. They don't
Mm.
give her a name, which I think is weird, but that has got a lot of promise, because that could be the kind of thing that you could watch, but you don't need to feel like if you miss a week, you don't know, like, what now? Who's in
Sure.
love with what? It's just about them exploring space in the era immediately pre Kirk.
Yeah, that would be cool. And all are all of these on the CBS All Access or whatever it's
Yeah, no,
called?
I don't
Okay.
think that show has launched yet, but
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
definitely it's in production or post production. And you'll have to Google what the release date on it is, but I think it's coming out either this holiday season or 2021. It's
Okay.
definitely in the pipeline.
I'm probably going to have to break down and get that, because I've wanted to watch although I've heard kind of mixed things about it, but I've wanted to watch the Jordan Peele Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Oh, and talking about just a quick aside with that. Talk about a weird 80s, although I think it might have been 1990 that came out. But Jordan Peele is producing a remake of The People Under the Stairs. Did you ever see that? The Wes Craven movie?
No.
That's a really weird. I don't think I've seen it since it originally came out, but it's a really weird horror movie that's another one that's kind of a cult film, and it's like, wow, that's kind of strange that they're going to, reboot that. But CBS All Access, they're also I think it's probably pretty soon, they're doing The Stand. So
Yeah.
it's I kind of feel like, it happens this way with all of these streaming services. They all have like one big show that they kind of launch with, and it's like, well, I'd kind of like to see that, but I don't care about any of the other stuff.
Yeah.
And then they all start to add some more things, and then you're just kind of like, okay, now I guess I'm going to have to get this one, or I'll never see these, these shows. But
well, if you wait till builds up a backlog of stuff
you
you
can
want
get
to
them,
see,
you
what
can
is
rent
it, like
them. Yeah.
$6.99 a month or something like that?
Right.
So
Yeah.
if you wanted to do CBS All Access for a month and you had all that different stuff you wanted to watch on it, you could watch a different show every night and probably not get through it all in a month. But
Sure.
that's lunch one day, $6.99. If you go to
yeah,
Panera
yeah.
or McDonald's or something, get lunch.
Sure. Yeah, they're all cheap enough that you're just like, oh, what the heck,
And you can turn it on and off. They
Right.
don't make you subscribe for a whole year. So
yeah, I have the
get your sister to give you the login,
yeah, exactly. I have the one that I'm going to cancel because they're changing it, and there's not a lot on it. But I have the DC Universe app or whatever, and it has Doom Patrol, which like they moved to.
Yeah.
Have you
I
seen
never got
that?
into that. Yeah, you recommended it to me. I watched the pilot, and I've since watched a few more episodes, and I like the people in it. It's just never landed the hook.
Yeah, it's not. I've not watched the whole thing of it, but they did a Swamp Thing show, which again I watched a couple episodes, and a friend of mine said like it starts out good and kind of. I think he said they cut the budget a bunch after, and it was kind of noticeable. But that one is they're moving all of their shows to HBO Max, and it's just going to be there won't be any series on it. It's just going to be a comic app, where you can like read, which I'm not interested in. I don't really like to read stuff on a an iPad or whatever. But
Yeah.
so I'll probably cancel that one, and then that'd be one I could justify getting the. I just hate having the different streaming services, and a lot of them I don't watch.
Yeah. Yeah, so shut them off. You can
Yeah.
always spin them back up when you
Sure.
I signed up for HBO when the new Game of Thrones was coming on, and because I didn't want to wait. They're like, just wait 3 or 4 months till it's all there, and you can. I'm like, no, I gotta see each episode as it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, why? I'm like, because I'm addicted to it. Okay?
Yeah.
But then I'd forget to turn it off, and then you get a
Sure.
bill, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
HBO's $15 a month, and you're like, ooh, you think you're fancy. But and then you just got to go, unsubscribe, and you can always. They're happy to have you back whenever you got something else you want to watch.
There's also I think it started. Have you watched the Star Trek animated series? That I think is by the people who do Rick and Morty.
No, I
Okay.
haven't.
I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I like Rick and Morty, but
Yeah,
I don't know. There's just something about it that's kind of lower decks or something like that.
yeah. I don't think it. I don't think the reviews were real great on it.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't look exciting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And Rick and Morty, now that they've got a deal where they got some big deal finally, where it's like 72 episodes or something, or 7 seasons. They finally, Cartoon Network or Comedy Central, whoever owns it, went all in and just was like, okay, great, crank a bunch of this out. They've clearly dusted off a bunch of old scripts that they rejected for earlier seasons because the material is not as good.
Yeah.
Like at its best, Rick and Morty is really interesting and funny and puts its finger right on some paradox of the culture at the time, and manages to make fun of itself and make fun of us and make fun of the thing it's making fun of, but still have you care and laugh. And some of these recent episodes just kind of like, okay.
I think the people involved with that have gotten stretched too thin because they also have a show. I forget what it's called, but they also have a show on Hulu that's about like this alien family that crash lands on Earth or whatever, and so it's like their kids are going to school and all this kind of stuff. And so I think they're doing too many different things.
Good for them, I guess.
Yeah, I mean but yeah, those Star Trek shows. I've been thinking for a long time about getting the app, and I'd like to watch some of them.
I still think, I think you would like Raised by Wolves. It gets really weird. By the time it gets to the end of it, you're kind of like, wait, what? Like it devolves fast and hard right at the end, where you're kind of like, wait, what's happening? What is this about? There's a what now? But the first half of it, at least, I thought was certainly the first 3 episodes. If you only watch the first 3 episodes that I guess Ridley Scott himself directed or whatever, it's really interesting, man. And it's androids, and it's Kepler whatever 22 is some alien planet, and they talk about a war that happened on Earth between atheists and the religious sect, and it just layers and great weird performances, and I think you would really dig it.
Yeah,
even if you
it looked
don't
like
stick
something I
with
think
it.
I'd be into. Yeah. Yeah, I want to check it out for sure.
But okay, so our consensus on Buckaroo Banzai is that definitely it's a movie worth watching if you're into cult classics and the 80s and the genre and everything we like to talk about on this show. But the caveat is that when you sit down with a bowl of popcorn and a beer to actually watch it, it isn't as fun as you hope it's going to be. And it left both of us, correct me if I'm speaking for you incorrectly here, but it left both of us sort of wishing it was a more fun experience actually watching it start to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on.
Cool. So do we already decide what we're going to do next time? I forget.
We had talked about, so we've gotten our first listener request. My friend Shelley loves the movie Silverado and requested that we do that. So that's a little bit of a new genre for us. We haven't done an actual Western, and this is I don't really want to give everything away, but I think it's a little bit like Fright Night was last week, where it was like the 80s take on vampire movies. I feel like Silverado is kind of the 80s take on, or an 80s take on Westerns.
I love it. And
Okay,
I have
cool.
seen Silverado, but it's been a long time.
Been a long time for me too.
And I think I resisted it when I saw it because it was the sort of, young brat pack actors that I wasn't all that into at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But for Shelley, absolutely. Why don't we, for next time, we're going to review Silverado. Join us, and we will look forward to having a lively discussion about it next week.
All right. All right. All right. All right.